What if the person you mocked turned out to be one of the richest, most influential people in the world? Jake Turner didn't think twice when he snapped the photo. He had just slumped into seat 3A of first class, bitterly clutching his phone and boarding pass, frustrated that his trip to San Francisco was more of an escape than a mission. His startup had crashed, his savings were nearly gone, and this flight was a desperate shot at redemption. That's when he noticed the guy beside him. Hoodie pulled over his head, scuffed sneakers, wild scribbles filling a black notebook in his lap, and a mumble that sounded like alien math equations. Jake raised an eyebrow, smirked, and quietly snapped a photo under the caption, "First class got weird." It wasn't much, just a cheap laugh for his small Twitter following. But in that moment, frustration made mockery seem like a shortcut to validation. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The flight from Austin to San Francisco wasn't long, but it was long enough to feel like a lifetime when you're sitting next to a riddle of a man who refuses to make eye contact. Jake tried to strike up a conversation anyway. "You heading to Silicon Valley too?" he asked casually. The man gave the slightest nod, not looking up from his notebook, where he had just drawn what looked like a spaceship landing on Mars. "You in tech or something?" Jake pushed, trying to draw him out. The man glanced sideways, gave a faint smile, and then returned to his doodles. Jake leaned back, annoyed. Who was this guy? And why was he acting like Jake didn't exist? For someone in first class, he looked more like a college dropout than a business executive. Jake himself had thrown on a blazer, tried to look sharp, even though his bank account was draining fast. He had printed out resumes and startup pitch decks, old school hustle in a sea of AI. But this guy? He was different. Not rude exactly. Just, elsewhere. The flight attendant came by, offering champagne. Jake declined but noticed the mystery man quietly accept a glass, then hand over a small, folded napkin with what looked like a tiny sketch on it. She smiled like she'd just been handed a winning lottery ticket. "Do you know who that is?" the woman across the aisle whispered to Jake after the attendant walked away. "No idea. Probably some eccentric professor." The woman laughed softly. "That's Elon Musk." Jake froze. "What?" he asked, not even trying to hide the panic in his voice. "Elon Musk," she repeated, as if saying the name of a living myth. "I met him once at a SpaceX event. He's intense." Jake turned slowly toward the man next to him. The hoodie was still up. The notebook now closed. But the moment felt entirely different. A sinking weight hit Jake's stomach like a stone. Had he really just tweeted a joke about that guy? The guy behind Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, and basically half the future. The tweet was still open on Jake's phone. No likes. Yet. Maybe he could delete it before it spread. He opened Twitter again, hovered over the delete button, then paused. Was it even real? Could that truly be Elon Musk? He looked again. The man now pulled back his hoodie and adjusted his seat. His face, now more visible, was unmistakable. Older than Jake expected, but sharp. Observant. Still quiet. Jake deleted the tweet and tried to disappear into his seat. The rest of the flight passed in painful silence. Turbulence struck halfway through, jostling the plane and making Jake clutch his armrest. Elon barely flinched. Jake turned his head toward the window, pretending to be calm. He remembered the night his startup's main investor walked away. It had been raining, hard, and Jake had stood outside the investor's office like a soaked, rejected intern. That memory flooded back now, mixing with the shame brewing from this mistake. They landed smoothly at SFO. As the plane taxied to the gate, Jake stayed glued to his seat. Elon stood, nodded at the flight crew, and walked off the plane without a word. A sleek black SUV waited for him outside. The flight attendant walked past Jake and said quietly, "He liked your jacket, by the way." Jake looked up, confused. "He said it was a bold choice," she added with a smile. Then she leaned in. "You know, most people never notice him when he's dressed down. But you did." Jake wasn't sure if that made things better or worse. As he walked off the plane and into the terminal, his phone buzzed. A notification. Someone had screenshotted his tweet. And posted it. With the caption, "Guy mocks Elon Musk in first class." Internet, do your thing. Jake stopped dead in the middle of the gate area, watching the retweets multiply in real time. He turned off his phone. Then turned it on again. Too late. The internet was faster than any delete button. Faster than regret. Faster than the truth. And now, Jake Turner, failed founder and accidental Twitter villain, had become the main character of the day. People whispered as they passed him. Some stared. Others laughed. The weird dude in first class. He wasn't weird at all. He was Elon Musk. And Jake had just learned that the hard way. Jake Turner wasn't always a guy who mocked people in first class. He used to believe he'd be one of them, not by accident, not by mistake, but because he earned it. He grew up in a 2-bedroom rental in East Austin, Texas, raised by a single mom who juggled 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. His father had left when Jake was 10, the kind of clean exit you only read about in divorce papers, not the kind that leaves a voicemail or a forwarding address. Jake learned early that if something was going to happen for him, he'd have to make it happen himself. His mom, Linda, used to say, "You've got a stubborn head, just like your dad, but at least yours is aimed upward." Jake clung to that. He was the kind of kid who built robots out of microwave parts, who got in trouble in school not because he was lazy but because he kept arguing with the teacher that his math answers were more efficient than the books. He didn't want to memorize, he wanted to optimize. He wasn't easy to raise, but he was driven. In high school, while his friends were playing Xbox and throwing footballs, Jake was on forums late into the night, teaching himself Python and JavaScript. By the time he turned 18, he had built his first app, a scheduling tool for students. It didn't make money, but it got attention. Enough for him to land a spot at UT Austin in computer science. But Jake didn't last long in college. 3 semesters in, he dropped out. Not because he couldn't handle the work, but because he couldn't handle the waiting. Everything felt too slow, lectures, assignments, bureaucracy. He wanted to build now, not sit through another semester of theory. So he left, packed up everything he owned into a used Honda Civic, and drove straight to a co-working space downtown where other dreamers like him were trying to catch lightning in a bottle. That's where he met Cam Gwynn, a quiet but brilliant UX designer from Houston. Together, they launched a startup called Fuseline, an app designed to help small businesses automate their customer communication. It was sleek, efficient, and for a short time, it was catching fire. They landed a seed investment of $250,000 from a local angel investor who believed in scrappy underdogs. Jake thought he was on the rocket ship. But the flame didn't last. Fuseline launched just before the market was flooded with similar tools from companies with bigger budgets and better networks. When their largest client left for a cheaper competitor, revenue plummeted. Then came the arguments, first about features, then about direction, and finally about everything. Cam blamed Jake for overpromising. Jake blamed Cam for not iterating fast enough. Their friendship, which had once felt unbreakable, cracked and fell apart like a poorly coded app. The investor stopped returning emails. Jake tried to pivot, first to AI chat features, then to something with crypto integration, but nothing stuck. Every pivot felt more desperate than the last. The team shrank. The Slack channels went silent. Eventually, Jake was left alone in the office with a whiteboard full of half-finished dreams and a lease he couldn't afford. He didn't even tell his mom it had failed. She still thought he was out there doing the next big thing. He let her believe that because it was easier than admitting he'd bet everything on a vision and come up empty. His friends had moved on. Some into cushy jobs at Google and Meta, others into real estate or grad school. Jake had no safety net. He had always said no to backup plans. And now that he needed one, there was nothing. No job offers. No money. No future. Just a flight to San Francisco, where he was hoping to pitch one last version of FuseLine to a minor VC firm that had agreed to hear him out as a favor. The flight wasn't even fully paid for. He used airline miles he'd been hoarding for years and an upgrade voucher a friend had sent him out of pity. He'd dressed nice, rehearsed his pitch, and convinced himself he was still somebody. Then he got on the plane, sat next to Elon Musk, and tweeted one of the dumbest things he'd ever posted. That was the truth Jake was living with as he walked through SFO, humiliated, exhausted, and unsure whether to laugh or cry. He took a rideshare to the Mission District where his old college roommate, Mark, had offered him the couch for a few nights. Mark had made his own kind of success, working on an enterprise AI platform, and he greeted Jake with a mix of concern and amusement. "You really tweeted about Elon Musk?" While sitting next to him, he asked, passing Jake a beer. "You've always had a gift for burning bridges you didn't even know were there." Jake tried to play it off like it didn't matter, but it did. The whole world had seen it now. Screenshots of his tweet had spread across Reddit and Twitter. The tech blogs were already circling, and Jake knew this wasn't going to blow over. "I didn't know it was him," Jake mumbled. "You know how weird some startup guys look. I thought he was. I don't know. Some burnt-out hacker." Mark shrugged. "You weren't wrong. He kind of is. Just also a billionaire genius with a flamethrower company." Jake spent the night refreshing Twitter, deleting old posts, scrubbing his LinkedIn, and praying that no one connected him to FuseLine just yet. He wasn't ready to explain that failure publicly, not after this. He had come to San Francisco for a second chance. Now he'd be lucky if he got out without being permanently memed. At 3 a.m., he finally crashed on Mark's couch. He didn't sleep well. His brain kept replaying the moment he heard the name Elon Musk. Over and over again. The hoodie. The sketches. The muttering. The silence. He wondered what would have happened if he'd just sat down, kept his mouth shut, and said nothing. But that wasn't who he was. He always had something to say, always thought he was the smartest guy in the room. That worked in pitch meetings and late-night code sessions, but on a plane next to a titan of industry? Not so much. The next morning, he woke to a phone full of notifications and a message request from someone named Tara Michaels. He didn't recognize the name. Her profile said she worked at Tesla. The message was short: "Mr. Musk would like to meet. Are you available tomorrow?" Jake stared at the screen. He read the message 5 times. It didn't make sense. Was it a joke? A trap? A stunt for a YouTube video? But the email address was real. The domain was Tesla. The LinkedIn profile checked out. This wasn't spam. This was real. Elon Musk, yes, the Elon Musk, wanted to meet him. The guy who tweeted a joke at his expense. The guy whose startup had flamed out like a faulty rocket. The guy who hadn't had a win in 2 years. Jake stared at the message and laughed, once, bitterly, and then again with something else in his chest. Fear. Maybe. But also, just maybe, a spark of something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Jake woke up in a fog, his body stiff from sleeping on Mark's couch and his mind still half frozen from the shock of the message. He reread it in the dim morning light just to make sure it wasn't a stress-induced hallucination. The timestamp was real. The domain was real. The name? Very real. Mr. Musk would like to meet. Available tomorrow? Jake had no idea what he was supposed to say in response to something like that. He lay back, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what this could possibly mean. Was it a trap? Was Elon going to roast him in person? Was this some kind of power play to make an example out of him? It made no sense. Elon Musk didn't have to deal with people like Jake. He had teams for that. Lawyers, PR reps, fixers. Whatever this was, Jake had to know. So he typed the shortest, most cautious reply he could think of, yes. I'm available. An hour later, another message came. You'll be picked up at 11 a.m. for a meeting at the Fremont factory. That was it. No details. No agenda. Just a time and a location that might as well have been a different planet. Jake felt like he was about to be abducted by aliens. He threw on the best clothes he had, clean jeans, a navy button-down, the same blazer he wore on the flight, and tried not to think about how ridiculous it all was. He still didn't even know why Elon had been on that plane. Was it business? Was he scouting? Was it just coincidence? Did he even see the tweet? Jake didn't have answers, only questions, and the creeping suspicion that he was about to walk into a trap he couldn't see. At 10:58, a black Tesla Model X pulled up outside Mark's apartment. The driver rolled down the window, confirmed Jake's name, and motioned for him to get in. No small talk. No music. Just the quiet hum of electric power and a GPS route leading straight to Tesla's Fremont facility. The whole ride, Jake sat in silence, palms sweating, mind racing. He thought about every stupid thing he'd ever said online, every half-baked idea he'd pitched, every sarcastic comment he'd made about billionaires and tech brothers. What was Elon going to say to him? What could Jake even say in return? The factory loomed ahead like a spaceship had crash-landed and decided to stay. Massive buildings, all white and steel, buzzed with motion. Security was tight, but the driver had clearance. They rolled straight through. Jake stepped out of the car, feeling wildly underdressed. A woman in a black blazer greeted him at the entrance and handed him a visitor badge. Please follow me. He was led through glass corridors and echoing hallways. People moved with purpose, heads down, fingers tapping on iPads or walkie-talkies. Jake tried to keep pace, scanning everything, the rows of production lines, robotic arms assembling parts, sparks flying in protective chambers. This wasn't a startup. This was a machine. A universe. A monument to relentless vision. After several turns, they arrived at a quiet office tucked into the upper level of the building. Minimalist. Clean. Glass walls, metal frames, a single desk, and behind it, Elon Musk. He looked up as Jake entered, no smile, no handshake. Just a simple question, you think I'm weird? Jake's breath caught in his throat. He didn't expect that to be the first thing said. He blinked, hesitated, and nodded slightly. Yeah. Honestly? At the time? I did. Elon didn't seem offended. If anything, he looked mildly amused. You posted that photo before we even took off. Why? Jake didn't know if this was an interrogation or some kind of psychological test. I don't know, he said truthfully. It was stupid. I was frustrated. I didn't know who you were. I just thought, some guy mumbling to himself in first class. I was trying to be funny. Elon stared at him. And what did you get out of it? Jake swallowed. Nothing. Just a lesson. Elon finally leaned back, folded his arms. A lot of people post things to feel important. To control how they're seen. To feel smarter than someone else. That doesn't build anything. But you already know that, don't you? Jake winced, unsure how to respond. Elon tapped the side of his desk, then stood up and walked to the window. You're a founder. You failed recently. Yeah, Jake admitted. A few times. Failure's not the problem, Elon said. Cowardice is. Jake's mouth went dry. He wasn't sure if that was aimed at him or the world in general. You still building? Elon asked. Trying to, Jake said. Trying, Elon repeated. Trying isn't building. Silence settled in again. Elon turned back around, leaned against the desk, and looked Jake in the eye. Pitch me. Jake blinked. Right now. Right now. Jake's heart kicked into gear. He hadn't come prepared to pitch. Not really. But something about the intensity in Elon's tone made him forget everything else. He launched into it, the idea he'd been refining in his head for months. Not the failed app, not FuseLine, but something newer, rawer. A smart grid platform for homeowners to track, store, and redistribute solar power. A clean energy command center built for everyday users, not engineers. He called it Pulse Grid. It wasn't finished. It didn't have a team. Just a prototype on paper and a working model on his laptop. Elon listened, silent, his expression unreadable. Jake talked for 5 minutes straight, trying to sound confident, trying to make it sound real. When he finished, Elon nodded slowly. You've thought about this. I have. You care about it. I do. It's not ready. I know. Elon tilted his head. But it might be worth building. You have a team. No. Not anymore. You broke it? Yeah, Jake said. I did. Elon didn't flinch. Good. Then you know where not to step. A moment passed. Then Elon straightened up. You're coming with me to Boca Chica. Jake blinked again. What? Texas. Tomorrow. You need to see what it means to go all in. Jake was speechless. Why are you doing this? Elon smiled faintly. Because you looked at me and saw someone irrelevant. But then you looked again. You changed your mind. Most people don't. With that, Elon motioned toward the door. Tara will get you the itinerary. Don't pack much. It's not a vacation. Jake stood slowly, the gravity of what just happened finally sinking in. Elon Musk, arguably the most important tech visionary of the modern age, had just offered him something far more valuable than funding. A second chance. A door back into the world he thought he'd been exiled from. As he walked out of the office, his heart pounding in his chest, Jake felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not relief. Not success. But purpose. And it terrified him in the best possible way. Jake packed a backpack with exactly what Tara had told him, light clothes, sturdy shoes, his laptop, and nothing else. Elon doesn't like clutter, she had warned. And don't expect luxury. This isn't Napa. She had emailed the flight details, private jet, 8 a.m. San Jose to Brownsville. From there, a 2-hour drive to Boca Chica, Texas, home of SpaceX's Starbase. Jake still didn't know what to expect. He couldn't sleep again, not because he was uncomfortable on the couch, but because his mind was electric. He kept pacing, running through his pitch in his head, rehearsing how he'd answer follow-up questions, wondering if this was some wild hallucination brought on by burnout and too much caffeine. Mark had just shaken his head when Jake explained what was happening. Man, you really live in a different movie, he said. Don't screw this up. And also, don't tweet. Jake promised he wouldn't. He'd learned that lesson the hard way. The Tesla picked him up again, and the private jet was every bit as sleek and quiet as he expected, clean lines, matte surfaces, barely a whisper of engine noise. Elon wasn't aboard. Jake was the only passenger. 2 hours later, he touched down in Brownsville and was met by another driver who said nothing the entire ride but had the SpaceX logo embroidered on his sleeve. The landscape began to shift quickly, flat land, dry roads, no cities in sight, just endless Texas horizon. And then, suddenly, there it was, Starbase. It didn't look like it belonged to Earth. Silver rockets loomed like monuments from the future. Launch towers pierced the sky. Hangars buzzed with activity. Trucks moved silently across gravel paths. Engineers in jumpsuits moved in coordinated rhythm like part of an ant colony. The entire facility hummed with urgency. Jake felt like he had stepped into a place that time had skipped over, some pocket of existence where only ideas mattered and reality bent to willpower. Tara met him at the gate and handed him a guest badge. "No photos," she said. "Not even for your memories." "Understood," Jake replied, overwhelmed by the heat, the wind, and the sheer scale of what he was seeing. He followed her past giant spools of cable, stacks of fuel tanks, rows of solar panels, and into a nondescript trailer that served as a temporary operations hub. Inside, Elon was standing at a digital wall showing a live simulation of a booster stage landing. He looked back when Jake entered, nodded once, then turned back to the screen. "This is what obsession looks like," he said. "It's messy. It's late nights. It's arguing over decimal points. It's failure over and over until you get one thing right. And then everything else breaks." Jake stood silently, unsure whether to speak. "You don't build the future on weekends," Elon added. "You sacrifice everything. The people who think that's crazy, they're usually right. But the people who stay, they're the ones who make history." He turned and finally looked Jake in the eyes. "Can you handle that?" Jake nodded, more from instinct than confidence. "I think so." "Don't think." "No." Elon turned and walked out of the trailer. Jake followed. The tour began. It wasn't like any corporate tour he'd ever seen. No flashy presentations. No filtered press photos. Just raw work, technicians crawling inside engine chambers, welders shaping fuel lines, drones mapping launch sequences. Elon led him personally, explaining the nuances of each department in bursts of technical shorthand. Jake struggled to keep up but took it all in. What struck him most wasn't the technology. It was the people. Everyone here looked exhausted. But focused. Purposeful. Hungry. Like they believed the next 48 hours could change the course of humanity. That energy, it was addictive. Jake felt it pulling something out of him that he thought had been lost forever. Not ambition. Not pride. Something deeper. That sense he used to have as a kid when he stayed up all night building circuits and writing code because the idea wouldn't let him sleep. That unfiltered compulsion to make. After the tour, Elon brought him into a simple glass office overlooking the site. It wasn't big. There were no couches or luxury details. Just whiteboards, monitors, and a mini fridge full of caffeine. Elon pointed to a whiteboard and tossed Jake a marker. "Draw your product." "What?" Jake asked, surprised. "Right now." "Right now." Jake hesitated, then walked up and started sketching. Pulse grid, how it would manage incoming solar power, how it would route electricity between storage and demand, how it could integrate with Tesla Powerwall and EV charging. Elon nodded occasionally, asked a few sharp questions, and pushed Jake to think bigger. What happens in a power outage? How does it learn from usage data? How does it share excess power with the grid? Jake answered as best he could, scribbling and adjusting. Halfway through, Elon took the marker from his hand and added a section. "You'll need this. A decentralized protocol layer. Eventually, the system should operate peer-to-peer, not just cloud-to-user." Jake blinked. "You're saying make it a platform, not a product." "Exactly," Elon said. "Let it grow. Let others build on it. That's how you scale. Control is overrated." They spent 2 hours sketching. By the end, the board was filled with arrows, code snippets, and scattered acronyms. Jake stepped back, heart pounding. Elon stared at it, then at him. "You can build this," he said. "But not alone. And not halfway." Jake swallowed hard. "So what do I do?" "You have 90 days, Elon replied. Build a working MVP. Form a team. Solve the edge cases. If it works, I'll fund the seed round through OpenAI's sustainability grant. If it doesn't, no hard feelings. But you won't get another shot." Jake nodded, trying not to let the fear show on his face. "You'll get weekly check-ins. Not with me. With someone on my team. Don't waste their time." "Understood." Elon looked out the window. "You mocked me once. Now you get to prove me right for not writing you off." With that, he turned and walked away. The meeting was over. Jake stood there, motionless, for a full minute before exhaling. He had come to San Francisco with nothing but debt, doubt, and a backpack of regrets. And now, he had 90 days to build a clean energy platform that Elon Musk believed in. It felt like a fever dream. But it was real. He had the whiteboard photos on his phone. Even though Tara said not to take any. He figured Elon would understand. Rules bent for builders. That night, he sat in a cheap motel room in Brownsville, staring at his laptop, fingers hovering over the keyboard. He didn't open Twitter. He didn't call his mom. He didn't message Mark. He just opened a blank document and typed the words, "Postgrid, version 1.0 specification." And he didn't stop until the sun came up. Jake didn't sleep at all that night. Not out of anxiety, though there was plenty of that, but because for the first time in months, maybe years, his mind was clear. Razor sharp. He hadn't felt this focused since the earliest days of Fuseline, when he and Cam would pull all-nighters in a rented garage space just to get a prototype off the ground. But this wasn't a garage anymore. This was bigger. This was real. He had 90 days to deliver a working MVP of PulseGrid, a decentralized, user-friendly, smart grid energy management system. And he had to do it well enough for Elon Musk's team to consider funding a seed round. The stakes weren't just high, they were suffocating. But it didn't feel like pressure. It felt like a challenge. A test of everything he claimed to be. He opened a new Notion workspace and began organizing tasks, core feature set, cloud integrations, UI/UX flow, third-party compatibility, backend framework, storage options. It had to be modular, scalable, and, above all else, resilient. No bloat. No fluff. Just signal. Pure utility. He messaged a handful of former colleagues, people he hadn't spoken to since Fuseline collapsed. He sent short, direct messages. No sales pitch. Just honesty. "I'm building something new. Something real. Elon's involved. It's clean energy infrastructure. I need builders, not tourists. You in?" A few ignored him. One sent back a laughing emoji. But two replied with cautious yes. One was Priya Banerjee, a former systems engineer who had worked with him briefly before leaving Fuseline when the cracks started to show. She had since moved on to a smart city startup but was disillusioned with its corporate pivot. "I'll help," she wrote. "But only nights and weekends until I know you're serious." The other was Theo Mendez, a full-stack dev he'd met at a hackathon years ago, quiet, awkward, brilliant. "What are you paying?" Theo asked. "Nothing. Yet." "Cool. I'm bored anyway." Jake now had two people, a laptop, a deadline, and a borrowed vision that was slowly becoming his own. He flew back to San Francisco that afternoon and crashed at Mark's place again. "So?" Mark asked. "What was Boca Chica like?" Jake gave a tired grin. "Like the future already happened and I showed up late." He spent the next 3 days in absolute isolation, working from a corner of Mark's living room, headphones on, barely eating, barely speaking. Code. Diagrams. Debugging. Calls with Priya and Theo, long and frantic, every night. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't fast. But it was movement. And that was more than Jake had felt in months. Elon didn't message again directly, but Jake received a Slack invite from someone named Lena Young. Her profile said, Project Oversight, Neuralink, Tesla, Starlink. She introduced herself via message, Hi Jake, I'll be monitoring PulseGrid's weekly progress. We'll keep it light, but I will ask questions. Don't waste my time and I won't waste yours. Sound fair? Fair, Jake replied. Her first message came on day 7. Send me your architecture draft and your user flow diagram. Jake scrambled but delivered. She replied with 2 comments, make your fallback protocol faster. Latency on energy reroutes can't exceed 200 milliseconds under load. And, no one wants a dashboard with 9 buttons. Simplify. 3 is ideal. 5 max. She wasn't here to coddle him. She was here to sharpen the blade. Jake respected that immediately. Every day became a sprint. Mark started leaving meals by his laptop. Priya began sending daily design notes. Theo rewrote the entire back-end structure in Go without telling anyone, and when Jake protested, Theo just replied, your way was slow. He was right. It was. By day 12, Jake had a clickable wireframe and a functional back-end service with basic user account flow. It couldn't connect to real solar infrastructure yet, but it simulated local energy flow and rendered usage graphs in real time. It was enough to show proof of concept. Lena's second review came on day 14. Not bad, she wrote. Now break it and tell me why it failed. Jake ran failure tests. Simulated grid loss. Simulated battery drain. Simulated router outages. The platform fell apart on edge cases, but that's what she wanted. Good, she wrote. Now build for chaos. If it can't survive disaster, it doesn't deserve to exist. That became their new team motto, build for chaos. Jake started sleeping on a beanbag chair in Mark's apartment. Showered at a 24-hour gym. Lived off protein bars and discount coffee. He didn't even notice when the tweet resurfaced, again. Someone had posted a meme of Jake's original, weird dude, tweet, but this time with a twist. They added Elon's face, a Tesla rocket behind him, and the caption, this is why you shut up and listen before you post. It went viral again. Jake groaned. Here we go, he muttered. But the difference now? He didn't care. Not really. He wasn't just the guy who tweeted something stupid anymore. He was building something. Really building. Priya and Theo started calling it the redemption build. At first as a joke. Then it just stuck. Day 18 came with a surprise, a calendar invite from Lena titled Live Review, Elon Present. Jake's heart rate doubled. The meeting was in 48 hours. He hadn't expected to see Elon again until the 90-day mark, if ever. Jake panicked. The UI was still rough. The battery flow maps weren't intuitive. Theo's new deployment script broke every time it hit memory spikes. And Priya had just redesigned the color palette the night before. It's too startup-y, she had said. This needs to feel like a home appliance, not a crypto wallet. The night before the review, Jake didn't sleep. He ran through the demo a dozen times. Recorded a video backup in case the live stream crashed. Rewrote half the presentation. Scrubbed the codebase of every to-do comment and half-baked function. Finally, he sat back and stared at the logo on his mock-up dashboard, a clean, pulsating grid made of interconnected dots. PulseGrid. It looked real now. It felt real. The review call began with Lena on video, stoic as always. Then Elon joined, sitting in a room filled with models, engines, what looked like a Mars rover in the background. "Let's see it," he said. No pleasantries. No intro. Jake launched the demo. Walked them through user login, solar input management, emergency reroute protocol, neighborhood energy sharing simulation, cost savings dashboard, predictive consumption tracking. Elon watched silently. When Jake finished, he asked just one question: what happens if the cloud fails? Jake didn't hesitate. It switches to local mesh fallback. Nearest node with battery becomes the microgrid anchor. Elon nodded. Good. You're thinking ahead. Then another pause. It's early. But it's good. Keep going. The call ended 5 minutes later. No applause. No high fives. But Jake sat back, smiling. That was the first time he had heard Elon say, good. Just one word. But it meant everything. And for the first time since that flight, since that stupid tweet, that moment of insecurity and mockery and regret, Jake didn't feel like a joke. He felt like a builder. And he was just getting started. Jake hadn't seen the sun in days. Not really. The apartment curtains stayed closed to block the glare on his second-hand monitor. His phone was permanently set to Do Not Disturb, save for calls from Priya, Theo, or Lena. There were tabs open on battery degradation reports, solar inverter APIs, and community energy sharing protocols from Iceland. He lived in sweats. Ate whatever was microwavable. Caffeine had replaced hydration, and the only exercise he got was sprinting to the bathroom between deployment builds. He was halfway through the 90 days, and PulseGrid was alive, barely. They had a public beta environment. A working mobile demo. A local network fallback that worked 80% of the time. But bugs were crawling up through the seams like mold in a basement. Theo's backend was functional but fragile. Priya's UI refinement sometimes introduced layout issues. Jake had already rewritten the energy usage prediction model 3 times. And yet, they kept moving. The code broke. They fixed it. The dashboard lagged. They optimized it. The beta users, 10 households across 3 states, sent feedback daily, some of it harsh, but all of it useful. This graph makes no sense. Why can't I set power caps for night mode? The notifications are too vague. What does grid offset threshold exceeded even mean? Jake kept telling himself, this is what building looks like. This is what growth feels like. But after 35 days straight of 14-hour shifts and caffeine-fueled adrenaline, even the strongest belief begins to fray. And Jake was fraying. It started with the small things. Typing errors. Misnamed functions. Forgetting to save commits. Then it became physical. Headaches. Eye twitches. A strange numbness in his left hand. Theo noticed first. You're lagging, he said flatly on a late-night call. You're not reviewing my pull requests. I'll get to it, Jake said, rubbing his eyes. You're doing too much. Delegate. To who? Jake asked. You and Priya are already swamped. Then cut features. No one cares about carbon sink visualizers. Elon might. Elon cares about execution, Theo replied. Not eye candy. Deliver what matters. Jake knew he was right. But it still stung. Priya texted him an hour later, you okay? He didn't reply. He stared at the message for a full 5 minutes and just closed the window. He wasn't okay, but he didn't have time to not be okay. That night, he fell asleep at his keyboard. When he woke up, the code editor was open and filled with gibberish he'd apparently typed in his sleep. For a full 2 minutes, he couldn't remember where he was. That scared him. He grabbed his keys, walked outside for the first time in days, and just kept walking. The air was cold. His muscles ached. His brain was buzzing like a broken server fan. He walked down side streets, past silent laundromats and flickering neon signs, until he sat down on a park bench and stared into nothing. This was the cost. This was the price no one tweeted about. The burn beneath the hype. The part of building that couldn't be captured in launch videos or LinkedIn announcements. Not the success. The sacrifice. He thought about quitting, not out of failure, but fatigue. Just stopping. Telling Lena, I'm out. Letting someone else carry it forward. Letting this insane second chance slip away like the first one. But then he heard a kid's voice behind him. Mom, is that the guy from the Elon tweet? Jake froze. He turned slowly. A teenage boy stood nearby with his mother, holding a phone. The kid looked nervous but excited. Sorry, the mother said. He follows all the Tesla stuff. He recognized you. Jake forced a smile. Yeah. That's me. The kid grinned. You're building something now, right? That smart energy thing? Jake nodded. Trying to. That's so cool. Everyone online thought it was just a joke, but you turned it into a company. That's like, main character stuff. Jake laughed softly. Something like that. The mother smiled politely and pulled the kid along. Nice to meet you, the kid called out. Jake sat in silence after they left, a strange warmth settling in his chest. He didn't know the kid. Would probably never see him again. But in that moment, someone out there believed in what he was doing, because he hadn't given up. That was enough to get him back to the apartment. Back to the keyboard. Back to the war. The next morning, he called Priya and apologized. I've been tunnel-visioned. You and Theo have been carrying more than your share. I'll fix it. We're all tired, she said gently. But we're in this together. Just don't try to be a hero. We're not saving the world. Just changing how it runs. Jake paused. That's a good tagline. I'm stealing that. Take it. Just take a nap too. He did. A real nap. For hours on Mark's mattress while the city buzzed outside. He woke up groggy but better. Clearer. The bugs were still there. The work was still stacked. But he wasn't alone. Week 6 brought a new challenge, onboarding. They had to build a real installer's dashboard so licensed electricians could configure PulseGrid for homeowners. Not a demo. Not a simulation. A real interface tied to real usage. Theo took backend. Priya took layout. Jake did user flow. They built a sandbox in 4 days. On day 5, they tested it with an actual partner, an independent solar installer in Fresno who had agreed to try PulseGrid on one of his clients' smart homes. This is better than the crap SunPilot gave us, the man said. Still a little glitchy, but it makes sense. And it doesn't treat me like a moron. That was the most important praise Jake had ever received. He forwarded the feedback to Lena. She responded with a thumbs up emoji and a single line, Elon saw this. Keep going. Jake printed that message and taped it above his screen. On day 45, they pushed their first full-field beta release. 10 homes. 3 different smart battery setups. For utility providers. The bugs exploded, just like Jake predicted. But they fixed them, one by one. The users stayed patient because Jake stayed present. He called each one personally, walked them through updates, thanked them, took notes. He knew every name, every model of inverter they used, every complaint they logged. This wasn't a faceless app anymore. This was real. Tangible. Useful. Lena's weekly check-ins became less hostile, more curious. You're starting to think like a system architect, she said on one call. That's good. You're moving from hustler to builder. Jake grinned. That was the goal. Then stay the course. You're halfway there. Just don't collapse. He wouldn't. He couldn't. He was tired, but he was stronger now. Not because he'd conquered burnout, but because he'd learned to build through it. With help. With humility. With relentless purpose. And somewhere, in the margins of that chaos, he started to believe in PulseGrid, not as a redemption arc or a PR stunt or a billionaire's curiosity, but as a thing the world might actually need. Not a pivot. Not a brand. A solution. Something that mattered. And this time, he wasn't mocking anyone. He was just doing the work. By day 52, the stress wasn't just background noise, it was a second heartbeat. Jake had started seeing everything in real-time metrics, battery thresholds, uptime percentages, kilowatt-hour deltas. He saw power the way designers saw shapes, the way writers saw metaphors. He had learned to speak the language of electricity. His mind thought in watts and loss margins. It didn't matter if he was ordering lunch or brushing his teeth, some part of him was always optimizing for efficiency. Mark walked in one morning and stared at him like he was seeing a stranger. "You sleep?" he asked. Jake didn't answer. Mark whistled low. "You're all the way in now, huh?" "I have to be." "No. You chose to be." Jake knew he was right. He could have slowed down. Could have dropped a feature, taken a day off, hired another dev. But there was something primal in the momentum now. The burn was part of the process. Even Priya, who usually encouraged balance, had given up trying to stop him. "Just don't die," she joked once during a design call. "If you die, Theo's gonna make the whole thing command line only." "You say that like it's a bad thing," Theo muttered. But deep down, they were a team. Dysfunctional, yes. Exhausted, absolutely. But aligned. For all the friction, Jake couldn't remember the last time he'd felt this sink to people. Fuseline had been a rocket with no map. This was different. They had purpose. They had targets. They had fire. But they also had problems, real ones. On day 54, during a new install test in Arizona, the platform experienced a cascading sync failure between the cloud interface and the local inverter cache. That meant the user's battery dipped to zero during peak hours and pulled directly from the grid, causing their utility bill to spike by $79 in a single afternoon. Jake got the call. The homeowner was furious. "This is supposed to save me money, not bleed me dry." Jake apologized. Took the blame. Promised a fix. Then called Theo and Priya and had one of the worst debugging sessions of his life. They traced the error to a malformed firmware handshake on a third-party inverter. "We tested for this," Jake muttered. "Clearly not well enough," Theo said, but without heat. Just tired resignation. Priya patched the UI warnings to flag compatibility issues immediately. Theo wrote a workaround script and pushed it to all test units overnight. Jake called the homeowner again the next day. Explained the fix. Took the heat. "I'm not happy," the man said, "but at least you called." "No one ever does that." Jake hung up, drained but clear. This was leadership. Not headlining a product launch. Not getting a write-up in TechCrunch. This. Owning the mistakes. Solving the pain. Building trust with the very people who had the most to lose. That night, Lena sent an unscheduled message: "You've hit turbulence." "Good. Now prove you can fly through it." No emoji. No meeting. Just that line. Jake screenshot it. Printed it. Taped it to the wall next to her first one. On day 58, they had their first unsolicited inquiry. A solar company in Utah emailed, "We heard about PulseGrid from a colleague. Is this available for licensing?" Jake nearly dropped his phone. Priya was the first person he told. "Don't get ahead of yourself," she warned, but he could hear the pride in her voice. "It's one email," Theo added when Jake shared the news. "But it's a good email." They didn't respond right away. The platform still wasn't stable enough for third-party rollout. But it was working. People were talking. The ripple had started. That same day, Jake received a calendar invite titled, Project Review, Musk/Team. It was for day 60. Elon would be on the call again. This wasn't a check-in. This was judgment. Jake texted Priya. 10 days early. "You ready?" She replied, "Ask me again after I finish rewriting the install flow." Theo didn't say anything, but Jake saw his GitHub commit rate spike by 40%. That weekend was a war zone. They locked in final edge cases. Scrubbed the onboarding process. Hardened the emergency fallback logic. Jake rewrote half the documentation and redid the pitch deck to focus on grid efficiency and disaster resilience. When day 60 arrived, Jake wore a collared shirt for the first time since the airport. Not because he thought Elon would care, he wouldn't. But because it helped him feel human again. He ran through the pitch in his head twice while sipping a flat Red Bull. The call started at 9 a.m. Elon was already on screen, along with Lena and a man named Kareem, who was introduced only as Infrastructure Specialist, Starlink. Jake launched into the demo. Walked them through a new live install with real-time data. Showed how the app balanced solar input, predicted night usage, stored surplus, and shifted demand based on grid pressure. He highlighted the Arizona bug, and how they fixed it. He demoed the mesh fallback using a simulated outage. He ended with a line he hadn't planned, "We're not just storing power. We're sharing it." Elon leaned forward slightly. "Interesting. Run that again." "The mesh fallback." Jake complied. Elon studied the screen. "You're predicting trust behavior on a local level. That's not energy. That's community modeling." "Exactly," Jake said. "We think the future grid is less about utility monopolies and more about neighborhoods taking control." Elon didn't smile. But he said, "That's the first thing you've said that sounds like the future." Kareem asked a few technical questions. Lena followed up on installer compatibility. The call lasted 22 minutes. At the end, Elon spoke directly. "You're not done. This isn't ready. But it's real. And it's yours. I'm greenlighting your seed round. You'll get paperwork by end of day. Build wisely." The screen went black. The call ended. Jake sat frozen. Priya called immediately. "What just happened?" "We got it," Jake whispered. "We actually got it." Theo replied in Slack with a single gif of fireworks. Then, finally, Mark, who had been quiet for weeks, walked into the living room, saw Jake's face, and asked, "So, you gonna buy me out of my couch equity now, or what?" Jake laughed, louder than he had in months. They had made it through the first gate. Not the finish line, but a real beginning. PulseGrid wasn't a dream anymore. It was funded. It was growing. It was going to exist. And this time, no tweet in the world could reduce him to a joke. By the time the seed funding papers hit his inbox, Jake was no longer surprised by anything. Not the legal language. Not the signature from Elon's family office. Not the quiet line at the bottom, subject to continued performance review. It wasn't a blank check. It was a conditional bet. But that was fine. Jake wasn't here to coast. He signed the paperwork in the early hours of day 61, then walked 2 miles to a small 24-hour diner and bought himself a celebratory breakfast, black coffee, 3 scrambled eggs, and a plate of hash browns that tasted like freedom. The waitress smiled at him and said, "You look like you just won something." "Not yet," Jake replied, but I might have unlocked level 2. Back at the apartment, Mark was gone for the weekend, and the space felt strangely his. Not borrowed. Not temporary. Just his. He opened Slack and posted one line to Priya and Theo, funded. The replies came quickly. Priya, let's go. Theo, guess I can afford to shower again. The first order of business wasn't flashy. It was stability. Jake rewrote their roadmap and created a private repo for long-term builds. They finally had breathing room, and they had to use it wisely. Don't feature chase, he reminded the team. Stability first. Reliability is the feature. Priya brought in a junior UX designer she trusted, a calm, methodical guy named Jordan. Theo brought in a DevOps engineer from his university days, Maya, who quietly rebuilt their CI/CD pipeline in a week and cut deployment time in half. Suddenly, PulseGrid wasn't a 3-person death march. It was a small team. A real one. They set up daily stand-ups. Weekly retros. Monthly OKRs. Jake hated buzzwords, but structure was necessary now. This wasn't the scrappy sprint phase anymore. They were a company. A funded startup with oversight. Investors. Expectations. Elon never reached out again directly. But Lena did. More now. Every Friday came with a message, short and surgical. Battery sync protocol. Still too slow. Cut response time by 30%. Install wizard fails if local cache exceeds 50 megabytes, fix that. Your blog post on grid equity is vague. Speak like a founder, not a freshman. Each message came like a scalpel. Precise. Demanding. In a strange way, Jake looked forward to them. They kept him honest. Honest about what mattered. Honest about what didn't. Somewhere in the second week post-funding, a tech podcast reached out. A mid-tier show hosted by a pair of ex-founders who liked to spotlight rising startups. Come on the show, one of them said. We want to talk about how the Elon tweet turned into a company. Jake hesitated. He hadn't spoken publicly about it since it happened. The meme lived its own life now. Sometimes people still reposted it with, "that aged well," captions. Sometimes with, "typical tech bro gets lucky." But the narrative was drifting. He didn't care about controlling it, but maybe it was time to shape it. He agreed. The podcast went live on a Thursday. They asked about Elon, of course. About the tweet. About the plane. Jake kept it simple. I mocked a guy I didn't recognize because I was insecure and tired and stupid. But instead of holding it against me, he gave me a shot. He told me to build. And I did. So, the host asked, "Are you and Elon close now?" Jake laughed. I haven't talked to him in weeks. He doesn't care about being close. He cares about results. And PulseGrid? PulseGrid, Jake said, isn't about him. It's about what happens when energy stops being invisible. When we stop thinking of the grid as something we use, and start thinking of it as something we share. That line caught on. Clips from the episode went semi-viral in climate tech circles. A few clean energy newsletters picked it up. The next day, they got 3 more inquiries. A small municipality in Oregon. A solar co-op in Georgia. A school district in Colorado. Jake didn't respond right away. They still weren't ready. But now the signal was real. The echo had begun. Still, not everything was clean. They had a major regression bug in their iOS app that caused usage graphs to freeze during low signal mode. Theo fought with the framework for 3 days before finding a rogue function that was throttling redraws during power save cycles. Maya accidentally pushed an unstable update to all live test homes, breaking the UI for 6 users. Jake stayed on the phone with every one of them, logging issues, shipping emergency hotfixes, taking every angry comment with humility. "We're in beta," he told one user. "We know it's bumpy. But you're helping shape the future." Most users accepted that. One didn't. "If I wanted to help shape the future, I'd run for office. I just want this to work." That stung. But it was fair. Building trust was harder than building tech. One night, around day 70, Jake stood in the apartment kitchen holding a cold slice of pizza and stared out the window. The city lights flickered. Somewhere across town, power was flowing, quietly, invisibly, from panel to battery to home. Maybe from one pulse grid tester to another. The thought gave him chills. He walked over to his whiteboard and drew a new diagram, one he hadn't shared with anyone yet. A fully autonomous, self-healing grid network. No central control. No single point of failure. Just pure, adaptive flow. Then he wrote 2 words at the top, post-grid. The idea scared him. But in the best way. At the next stand-up, he pitched it. "We're not just building post-grid for the now," he said. "We're building toward a future where people generate, store, and trade energy as easily as they send a text." Priya blinked. "That's ambitious." "It's inevitable," Theo said. "If we don't build it, someone else will." "So we do it," Jake said. "One node at a time." That weekend, they pushed a major update, PostGrid version 0.9. It included a new install wizard, an intelligent backup mode for outages, and the first working version of their community sharing model. The patch notes were simple, resilient, adaptive. Yours. And then, on day 74, something unexpected happened. Jake got an email. Not from Lena. Not from Elon. From a man named Martin Hensley, a senior VP at Gridway, one of the largest utility software vendors in the country. The subject line read, "PostGrid Proposal." Jake opened it cautiously. It wasn't hostile. It wasn't even aggressive. It was interested. Martin congratulated them on the product. Said he'd been following the story. "We're curious if PostGrid would consider strategic partnership or possible integration with Gridway's infrastructure tools. Our clients are increasingly interested in local microgrid optimization, and we think your platform could offer a compelling edge." Jake read it twice. Then again. It was vague but real. The kind of thing people spend years hoping for. He sent it to Lena. She replied 10 minutes later, "Don't sell out yet." He sent it to Priya and Theo. "Priya, we're not ready. But we could be." "Theo, tell them we'll talk after version 1.0. Jake didn't respond to Martin right away. He needed to think. Not just about strategy. About values. What kind of company was PostGrid going to be? Fast cash? Fast exit? Or long burn with impact? That night, he made a decision. He drafted an email and saved it in drafts. The subject line, "Thank you. We're not ready to talk yet. But when we are, it'll be on our terms." He'd hit send eventually. But not now. Not until they earned it. Because the flame had caught. The echo was growing. And Jake, once just the guy who mocked a stranger in first class, was now leading a team building something real. Something powerful. Something that might actually change the world. 1 kilowatt at a time. The victory lap was brief. By day 80, the team was back in the trenches, troubleshooting bugs that had somehow multiplied overnight. The new community sharing feature was working, but only when conditions were perfect, sunny days, minimal load, and users who remembered to update their apps. Otherwise, it faltered. The network lagged, data packets dropped, and users grew impatient. Jake could feel the pressure building again, the familiar knot of anxiety tightening in his chest. He'd barely caught his breath after the seed round before the weight of expectation started pulling him down. His phone buzzed incessantly, messages from Lena, investors, early adopters, even Elon's assistant, all asking for updates, timelines, reassurance. One particularly sharp message from Lena read, "You're good. But good isn't enough anymore. Push harder." Theo stayed in his corner, furiously coding, occasionally muttering about legacy systems dragging us down. Priya, once the voice of calm, was starting to snap. "If users can't trust us, none of this matters," she told Jake during a late-night video call. "We're building a revolution on a foundation of bugs." Jake knew she was right. He was haunted by the memory of that angry homeowner in Arizona, and he couldn't let PulseGrid become another promise broken by tech hype. But he also knew the stakes. The clean energy movement was watching. Investors wanted results. Elon's tweet had lit a fire that wouldn't go out, not easily. On day 83, a critical failure hit during a demo with a large solar installer in Nevada. The app froze, batteries drained unexpectedly, and the installer's clients were left powerless for hours. The call ended in silence, and Jake felt the burn of failure like a slap in the face. He called the installer directly the next day. "We're on it," he said. "I'll keep you updated every hour." The installer's voice was cold but patient. "Just make sure this never happens again." Jake hung up and called a team meeting. "We need a full code audit," he said. "And a rollback plan." Maya took point on the audit. She worked through the weekend, digging deep into the logs and deployment scripts. The findings were sobering. A flawed sync algorithm was causing the system to misread battery status under certain load conditions. A tiny bug. Massive impact. The fix was complex, requiring a rewrite of the core data engine. Jake and Theo stayed up nights rewriting code, testing edge cases, and coordinating with Priya on new user notifications to explain the issues honestly and transparently. Trust, they all agreed, was their most valuable currency. Meanwhile, outside the digital world, Jake's personal life was fraying. His phone calls with his sister became shorter, his weekend plans with Mark cancelled more often. He was slipping into old habits, late nights, cold meals, and a growing sense of isolation. One evening, Priya confronted him gently. "You can't pour from an empty cup," she said. "If you burn out, PulseGrid burns out." Jake nodded but didn't reply. He wasn't sure how to balance it all anymore. Then came the news: a major competitor had announced a new battery-sharing platform, claiming to have secured a partnership with a national utility company. The announcement was everywhere: press releases, social media, tech blogs. The comparison was inevitable. Jake felt the sting of doubt creeping in. Were they too slow? Too small? Too naive? He stayed offline for hours, staring at the ceiling. The team needed a win. And fast. On day 90, they pushed PulseGrid version 1.0 live to all testers. It was the moment they'd been working toward for months, the transition from beta to production. The rollout was tense but smooth at first. Then, during a scheduled power outage simulation, a sudden spike in network traffic caused several nodes to crash. Users experienced blackouts, data loss, and app freezes. The backlash was swift. Social media lit up with complaints and memes mocking the guy who mocked Elon for failing to deliver. Jake took it all in. He could feel the sting, but also the familiar spark of determination. This wasn't the end. It was another beginning. He called an emergency all-hands meeting. "We're not perfect," he said. "But we're committed. We'll fix this. Together." Priya, Theo, Maya, they rallied. The days blurred into nights. They worked relentlessly, fueled by cold coffee and sheer will. Slowly, stability returned. Users who had left started coming back. Testimonials poured in. Stories of light staying on during storms, of bills dropping, of communities connecting. Jake realized PulseGrid wasn't just technology. It was hope. A movement. A challenge to the old ways. And while the storm clouds were still gathering on the horizon, he knew they had something worth fighting for. Something that might just change the world. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The morning after the storm felt different. The chaos had passed, but the air was thick with a new energy, an unspoken acknowledgement that things were shifting. Jake sat at his desk, eyes scanning lines of code and feedback reports. The glitches had been patched, the system stabilized, but something deeper was unfolding. PulseGrid wasn't just surviving, it was evolving. His phone buzzed with a message from Priya, "Coffee? We need to talk strategy." They met at a quiet cafe near the office, where the sunlight filtered softly through tall windows. Priya leaned forward, voice low but firm. The bugs shook confidence. "We need to rebuild trust. Fast. I've been thinking about launching a community ambassador program, real people, real stories, sharing how PulseGrid impacts their lives." Jake nodded slowly. That could work. People connect with people, not just tech. Priya smiled. Exactly. Authenticity is our best feature. Meanwhile, Theo was pushing hard on new features. Real-time energy trading, predictive load balancing, seamless integration with home automation. The vision was growing clearer, bigger, but so were the risks. Every new line of code was a gamble. On day 95, the team held a retrospective. They talked openly about what went wrong, what went right, and what they needed to do next. Jake felt a swell of pride listening to his small team, young, tired, fierce, committed to a dream bigger than themselves. That night, Jake finally called Mark. They met for dinner at their favorite dive bar. The conversation was tentative at first, strained by weeks of silence. But slowly, the walls came down. Mark listened as Jake spoke about the pressure, the failures, the small victories. "You're not alone in this," Mark said, clinking his glass against Jake's. "You've got a whole team. And me." The support rekindled something Jake hadn't felt in a while, hope. The next week brought unexpected news. Lena scheduled a call. "I'm impressed," she said, voice clipped but sincere. "You handled the crisis well. PulseGrid's resilience is your strength. But now, there's a new challenge." She explained a regulatory hurdle. New energy-sharing laws were tightening, threatening to stall community microgrid projects nationwide. "You need allies," she warned. "Start building relationships in government. Fast." Jake felt the weight settle again. Tech was only one part of the equation. Politics, policy, public opinion, they all mattered. Priya took the lead on outreach, organizing meetings with local officials and advocacy groups. Theo designed demos tailored for policymakers, emphasizing transparency and security. Jake found himself attending hearings, speaking at panels, sometimes feeling completely out of place but determined to learn. Through it all, PulseGrid's user base grew steadily. Stories flooded in from rural towns, urban neighborhoods, families embracing the power to control their energy. Jake read each message late at night, finding fuel in their words. One email stood out, a letter from a single mother in Ohio who used PulseGrid to keep her kids warm during a brutal winter blackout. "You gave us light when everything else went dark," she wrote. The letter stayed on Jake's desk for weeks, a reminder of why this mattered. As winter gave way to spring, the ambassador program launched. Jake watched video clips of ordinary users sharing their experiences, laughter and tears woven into each story. The movement was no longer just his. It belonged to the people. But the real test came unexpectedly. On day 120, a massive storm swept across the Midwest, knocking out power to millions. Utilities scrambled. Panic spread. PulseGrid's network, tested and hardened by months of trials, kicked into action. Community nodes shifted energy flow, batteries discharged strategically, and critical infrastructure stayed online. Jake stayed glued to the screens, tracking performance metrics in real time. The system was working. More than working, it was saving lives. Messages poured in, "We're safe, thanks to PulseGrid. Couldn't have made it without you. You're changing the world." But amid the triumph, Jake's phone rang. It was Martin Hensley from Gridway. "We've been watching the storm response," Martin said. "Impressive work. Let's talk partnership, soon." Jake smiled, the offer finally feeling earned. He knew the road ahead would still have obstacles, technical, political, personal, but in that moment, standing at the crossroads of vision and reality, he felt ready. PulseGrid had crossed the threshold. And the future was theirs to build. The call from Martin Hensley came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, the kind that made the city feel gray and tired. Jake was at his desk, eyes bleary from hours of debugging when his phone lit up with the Gridway caller ID. He hesitated for a second, this was the moment they'd been edging toward for weeks. Taking a deep breath, he answered. "Jake, thanks for picking up. I wanted to talk about what PulseGrid did during the storm." "Impressive. Really?" Martin's tone was measured but sincere. "We've been evaluating how a strategic partnership could benefit both of us. Gridway has the infrastructure and client base, but your technology brings something fresh, dynamic." Jake listened carefully. Martin outlined a proposal. Gridway would integrate PulseGrid's platform into their existing utility management systems, providing capital for scaling and access to major utility clients. In return, Gridway would take an equity stake and influence over product direction. It sounded promising but loaded with caveats. Jake's mind raced. On one hand, this was the opportunity to scale faster than they ever imagined. On the other, it meant giving up some control over their vision. He promised to consider the offer and asked for time to discuss it with the team. After hanging up, Jake closed his eyes, trying to quiet the storm inside. That evening, the team gathered in the cramped conference room, the air thick with tension. Priya broke the silence. "Gridway's offer could change everything," she said. "But we have to be careful. We don't want to lose what makes PulseGrid unique." Theo nodded. "We can't let them steer us away from community-first principles." Maya, usually quiet, added, "The funding would solve a lot of problems. But what about our users? Would they accept it?" The debate stretched late into the night, weighing pros and cons, risks and rewards. Jake knew that whichever path they chose would define PulseGrid's future. That weekend, Jake found himself alone, walking through a nearby park, the city lights blurred by rain. His thoughts drifted back to the flight months ago, the moment he mocked the strange man in first class. How naive he'd been. Now, he was part of something bigger than himself, yet the stakes felt higher than ever. He remembered Elon's words, build. Ship. Improve. The mantra echoed in his mind. The next morning, he called Lena. "I have Gridway's proposal," he said. "What do you think?" Lena's voice was calm but firm. "Don't rush. Partnerships can fuel growth or smother innovation. Understand what you're willing to compromise and what you won't. We want to scale. But not at the cost of our mission." "Good. Hold that line." Over the next week, Jake worked on a counterproposal. They would welcome Gridway's investment but insisted on maintaining product control and user privacy commitments. When the document was ready, he sent it with a note, "We believe in collaboration, not control." The response was swift. Martin appreciated the candor but warned that flexibility was necessary for any deal. Negotiations stretched into weeks. Meanwhile, PulseGrid's user base doubled, community ambassadors became local heroes, and the media buzzed with stories of grassroots energy empowerment. Amid the negotiations, Jake got a surprise visit. Elon Musk, quieter than usual but unmistakably intense, stopped by their office unannounced. "Heard you're making waves," Elon said, eyes scanning the whiteboards cluttered with diagrams. "Looks like you're turning a joke into a movement." Jake smiled. "Trying." Elon's grin was brief but genuine. "Remember, pressure creates diamonds. Keep pushing." The visit energized the team. Elon stayed for an hour, sharing insights, offering blunt advice, challenging assumptions. Before leaving, he dropped one last line: "Don't let anyone tell you the grid can't be reinvented." The weeks passed, the negotiations with Gridway nearing a delicate balance. Jake felt the weight of leadership keenly, each decision rippling through the lives of his team, users, and the future of clean energy. Finally, on day 150, the deal was announced. Gridway would invest $15 million for a minority stake, with strict terms protecting PulseGrid's autonomy and commitment to community principles. The news was met with cautious optimism from the team and their users. Jake stood before the press, answering questions with a mix of humility and confidence. Behind the scenes, he knew the real work was just beginning. The offer had opened a door, but walking through meant new challenges, new battles. Yet as he looked around at his team, Priya, Theo, Maya, he felt ready. They had crossed a threshold, faced doubts, and emerged stronger. The journey from mocking a weird dude on a plane to standing at the helm of a disruptive company was far from over. But Jake was determined. Because sometimes, the people you least expect can change your life, and the world, in ways you never imagined. The excitement of the Gridway deal brought new energy to PulseGrid, but also a fresh wave of challenges. Suddenly, Jake's startup was no longer a scrappy team working out of a shared office. They were a growing company with investors to answer to, deadlines to meet, and expectations to exceed. The pressure was relentless. The first few weeks after the announcement felt like a whirlwind. Gridway's executives moved in, pushing for faster timelines and deeper integrations. Meetings multiplied, shifting PulseGrid's rhythm from focused coding sprints to endless strategic discussions. Priya found herself stretched thin, balancing user engagement campaigns with investor relations. Theo retreated further into his code, trying to shield himself from the noise but frustrated by shifting priorities. Jake felt the strain too, each decision weighed heavier, each misstep magnified. He barely slept, waking up haunted by bugs he hadn't even seen yet. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, he found himself alone in the office, the hum of servers the only sound. He pulled up an old photo from the flight months ago, the weird dude, who turned out to be Elon Musk, sitting quietly, absorbed in his notebook. Jake smiled bitterly. How different it all seemed. The stakes were higher, the road rougher. He wondered if he had the strength to carry it. The tension spilled over during a critical product update. Gridway wanted a new feature that would allow utilities to override community settings in emergencies, a power grab disguised as a safety net. Jake and Priya pushed back. "It violates the trust we built with our users," Priya argued in the heated call. "We can't compromise our values for control." The Gridway reps were firm. "We're accountable to regulators. We need assurances." Jake felt caught in the middle. Could they hold their ground? Or was this the start of a slippery slope? The team debated late into the night. Maya worried about alienating their grassroots supporters. Theo warned about technical complexity. Jake knew a misstep here could unravel everything. At the same time, PulseGrid faced unexpected technical hurdles. Scaling the platform brought unforeseen bugs, security vulnerabilities, and server crashes. The community ambassadors started reporting outages and inconsistencies. Social media buzzed with complaints. Jake felt the sting of disappointment every time. During a team check-in, Priya spoke quietly. "We're losing momentum. People are doubting us." Jake swallowed hard. We can't let that happen. We have to fix this. They worked around the clock, triaging issues, rolling out patches, improving transparency. Slowly, the tide turned. Users appreciated the honesty and quick fixes. The ambassador program doubled down on outreach. Still, the cost was high. The team's morale wavered. Friends and family noticed Jake's absence, the missed calls, the distracted conversations. One afternoon, Lena dropped by unannounced. She found Jake at his desk, staring blankly at lines of code. "You need to step back," she said firmly. "This isn't just about tech. It's about leadership." The conversation stayed with him. Jake realized he was trying to do everything, coding, managing, negotiating, alone. He needed help. Slowly, he began delegating more responsibilities. Priya took charge of user relations. Theo led technical operations. Maya managed community engagement. Jake focused on vision, partnerships, and strategy. The shift was uneasy but necessary. Then came the biggest test yet, a coordinated cyber attack targeted PulseGrid servers, attempting to disrupt energy flows and steal user data. The team scrambled. Theo and the security experts worked through the night, isolating breaches, patching vulnerabilities. Priya communicated calmly with users, assuring them their data was safe and systems were secure. Jake felt the old panic rise but pushed it down. They had built something worth defending. The attack was repelled, but the scars lingered. The media picked up the story, praising PulseGrid's resilience but raising questions about security. The pressure mounted again. In a moment of rare vulnerability, Jake confided in Mark. "I'm scared we'll lose everything." Mark looked him in the eye. "You won't. You're stronger than you think. Remember why you started." That night, Jake revisited the letter from the Ohio mother. Her words grounded him. This was bigger than code, money, or politics. It was about people's lives. The team pulled together, stronger for the trials. Slowly, PulseGrid's reputation rebuilt. They launched new security protocols, hosted community webinars, and deepened partnerships with trusted local organizations. The struggle reshaped them, not just as a company, but as a family. Jake realized the path of innovation was never smooth. It demanded resilience, sacrifice, and unwavering belief. And as PulseGrid grew, so did his understanding of leadership, not as control, but as trust, vision, and heart. The months that followed felt like walking a tightrope stretched over an abyss. PulseGrid was growing, but every step forward was met with new obstacles that tested not only the company's technology but the very spirit of the team. Jake could feel the strain everywhere, in the cracks forming in conversations with Priya, in the exhaustion etched on Theo's face, in the quiet worry from Maya. The passion that once fueled long nights of coding and brainstorming was dimming under the weight of endless deadlines and unrelenting pressure. One particularly brutal week, things came to a head. The new energy trading feature Theo had championed launched with a series of unexpected glitches that caused user accounts to be incorrectly credited or debited. The backlash was immediate. Social media exploded with angry posts accusing PulseGrid of cheating the system and destroying trust. The community ambassadors struggled to calm the storm, but the damage was done. Jake sat in the conference room, feeling the walls close in as Priya laid out the crisis communications plan. "We need transparency, fast fixes, and an apology," she said. "Our users deserve that much." Jake nodded, but inside, a storm raged. How could so much effort unravel so quickly? The weight of leadership felt suffocating. That evening, he went home and found an empty apartment waiting for him. Mark was away on a business trip, and Jake's phone buzzed with missed calls from friends he hadn't spoken to in weeks. The silence pressed down. Alone with his thoughts, Jake reflected on the journey from that awkward flight months ago, mocking the odd man who would turn out to be Elon Musk, to this moment of near collapse. He asked himself the question that had haunted him since day one: was he really cut out for this? The next day, the team gathered early to tackle the crisis. Theo was subdued, running tests and debugging relentlessly. Priya coordinated with media outlets, crafting messages that balanced accountability with optimism. Maya rallied the ambassadors to reach out personally to upset users. Jake paced the room, grappling with the enormity of it all. Then, a surprise came from an unexpected place. A message arrived from one of their earliest users, a grandmother in rural Kansas who had been part of the first pilot. She wrote, "We know you're trying. We believe in what you're doing. Don't give up on us." The words hit Jake like a lifeline. He shared the message with the team. For the first time in days, a genuine smile broke across Priya's face. "We're not alone," she said quietly. The crisis wasn't over, but the team found renewed strength. They doubled down on fixes, rolled out compensations, and hosted live Q&A sessions with users. Slowly, the tide began to turn. But the personal cost to Jake was growing. The relentless pace left little room for rest or reflection. He found himself snapping at Priya during meetings, missing calls with Mark, and pushing his own health aside. One afternoon, after a particularly tense negotiation with Gridway executives, Jake collapsed in his office, overwhelmed and exhausted. Priya found him there, eyes closed, breathing shallow. "You can't do this alone," she said firmly. "Let us help." That night, Jake made a decision. He would step back from day-to-day management and focus on the big picture. Delegating was no longer a weakness, it was survival. He called a meeting with the leadership team. "We need to rebuild PulseGrid, not just the tech, but our culture," he said. "That means trust, communication, and balance." The team agreed. Slowly, changes took root. Work hours became more reasonable. Mental health check-ins were introduced. Open forums allowed team members to speak freely. The atmosphere shifted from fear to hope. Meanwhile, Jake reconnected with Mark, who encouraged him to take time away, to recharge and rediscover his passion outside of work. With hesitation, Jake agreed. He took a weekend off, hiking in the nearby mountains, breathing fresh air, and listening to the quiet. The break was a balm. He realized that leadership wasn't about bearing every burden, it was about building a community that could carry the weight together. Returning to the office, Jake felt renewed. PulseGrid still faced immense challenges, but the team was stronger, more united, and ready to face whatever came next. The experience left an indelible mark on Jake's understanding of success. It wasn't measured just by milestones or money, but by resilience, empathy, and the courage to keep going, even when breaking seemed easier. Just when the weight of everything seemed unbearable, a new force emerged to shift the tides. It was early spring, and the city was starting to shake off the last chills of winter, but inside the PulseGrid office, the atmosphere remained tense. Jake had been focused on healing the fractures within the company, rebuilding trust with users and calming nerves after the energy trading fiasco. The Gridway partnership was still uneasy, a fragile thread connecting them to resources but also bringing constraints. On one gray morning, as Jake sifted through a stack of emails, an unexpected message caught his eye. It was from a name he didn't immediately recognize, Senator Claire Donovan. The subject line simply read, "PulseGrid and the Future of Energy." Jake's heart skipped. The senator was a rising star in Washington, known for her progressive stance on clean energy and tech innovation. Intrigued, Jake quickly opened the email. Senator Donovan expressed interest in PulseGrid's work and invited Jake to meet her and her team to discuss how microgrid technology could play a role in upcoming energy legislation. This was more than a meeting, it was an invitation to shape policy, to have a voice in the laws that would govern their industry. Excitement and nerves mingled. Jake knew this could be a game changer. He immediately called Priya and Maya to prepare. Over the next few days, the team compiled data, success stories, and technical briefs to present. They rehearsed key points, anticipating tough questions about security, privacy, and scalability. When the day arrived, Jake found himself in a sleek government building, face to face with Senator Donovan and a panel of advisors. The room buzzed with formality, but Jake felt a quiet confidence. He shared PulseGrid's journey, the failures, the breakthroughs, the people behind the technology. Senator Donovan listened intently, asking sharp questions but also revealing a genuine passion for empowering communities and advancing sustainable energy solutions. The meeting ended with a clear commitment. Senator Donovan would advocate for legislation supporting decentralized energy systems, including grants and regulatory reforms that could remove barriers PulseGrid faced. Back at the office, the news spread quickly. The team was energized by the validation from such a powerful ally. Jake felt a surge of hope that transcended quarterly reports or user metrics. However, navigating politics was a new frontier. Lobbying and legal complexities soon followed. PulseGrid hired a small team of policy experts to help translate legislation into actionable strategies. The Gridway executives watched the developments cautiously, wary of shifts in power dynamics. Tensions simmered beneath the surface. One afternoon, as Jake prepared for a public forum with Senator Donovan, Priya pulled him aside. "This is our moment," she said. "But we have to be transparent with our users. They need to know the risks and benefits." Jake agreed. Together, they crafted clear messaging about the potential changes, emphasizing community control and privacy safeguards. The public forum was a success. Users and advocates spoke passionately, media coverage was favorable, and PulseGrid's profile soared. But behind the scenes, the stakes rose. Gridway pressured Jake to accelerate integration with their systems, pushing for compromises that clashed with PulseGrid's values. Jake stood firm, backed by Priya and Maya. They refused to let their mission be diluted. The battle wasn't easy. Late nights were spent drafting memos, attending meetings, and negotiating terms. The team grew weary but resolute. Then came an unexpected gesture. Elon Musk, who had been a silent observer for months, sent a brief message to Jake: "Keep your eyes on the prize. The future belongs to those who fight for it." That small note was a spark during dark days. Jake realized that alliances, both new and old, were crucial. The fight to reshape energy wasn't just about technology or money, it was about people, power, and persistence. The unexpected ally in Senator Donovan gave PulseGrid a voice in the halls of power, but it was Jake and his team's determination that would decide how far that voice could carry. With renewed purpose, PulseGrid prepared to push forward into uncharted territory, ready to face the inevitable conflicts and breakthroughs that lay ahead. PulseGrid's rising momentum was impossible to ignore, and as the company gained more attention, not everyone was pleased. The energy industry, deeply rooted in tradition and controlled by powerful incumbents, started pushing back. What began as whispers in boardrooms soon became a concerted campaign to slow PulseGrid's progress. Jake first noticed the signs during a routine meeting with the policy team. Reports surfaced of lobbyists working overtime to influence regulators, questioning PulseGrid's technology and its safety. Competitors launched smear campaigns on social media, spreading rumors about data breaches and system failures. The community ambassadors faced increasing hostility at town halls, with some utility companies organizing counter-events promoting centralized control. Jake felt a cold wave of frustration. They were fighting not just for innovation, but for a fundamental shift in power. One evening, after a particularly grueling day filled with negative press and difficult calls, Jake sat alone in the office, the glow of the city outside a stark contrast to his mood. Priya found him there, her face lined with exhaustion but determined. "They're trying to scare people," she said softly. "But we can't let fear win." The team brainstormed ways to fight back, not with aggression, but with transparency and education. They launched a campaign featuring real stories from users who had benefited from PulseGrid's platform, emphasizing safety and community control. At the same time, Jake ramped up meetings with regulators and legislators, leveraging the alliance with Senator Donovan to counter misinformation. But the pressure took its toll. Investors grew nervous, questioning the company's trajectory amid increasing resistance. Gridway executives pushed for faster concessions, threatening to pull funding if PulseGrid didn't align more closely with their interests. The tension reached a breaking point during a critical board meeting. Jake faced tough questions about strategy and sustainability. Voices clamored for a more cautious approach, for compromises to protect the bottom line. Jake stood firm. PulseGrid was built to challenge the status quo, he said. If we lose that, we lose everything. The room fell silent. For a moment, it felt like the company's future hung in the balance. Outside the office, the backlash extended to Jake personally. Anonymous threats arrived via email, accusing him of recklessness and endangering communities. Friends expressed concern, urging him to slow down or walk away. Mark reminded him to take care of his health. But Jake's resolve only hardened. He knew that change never came easy. One night, during a live Q&A session with users, Jake addressed the mounting fears head-on. "I understand the concerns," he said earnestly. "Change is scary. But we're building a future where communities control their energy, where innovation benefits everyone, not just a few. We won't back down." The response was overwhelmingly positive. Users flooded the chat with messages of support, sharing stories of how PulseGrid had made a difference. That outpouring gave the team renewed strength. In the months that followed, PulseGrid weathered the storm. They refined their technology, enhanced security measures, and deepened community engagement. The company became a symbol of resilience, inspiring others to challenge entrenched systems. Through it all, Jake learned that leadership meant more than vision and innovation. It required courage to stand firm in the face of opposition, and humility to listen and adapt. The backlash was fierce, but it forged a stronger PulseGrid, ready to take the next leap forward. After months of relentless pressure, the tide finally began to shift in PulseGrid's favor. The backlash from entrenched energy interests had pushed the company to its limits, but it also galvanized support from unexpected quarters. Jake sensed the momentum changing during a community summit held in Denver, a gathering of innovators, activists, and everyday people passionate about sustainable energy. The room buzzed with excitement and hope, a stark contrast to the tension-filled meetings with investors and regulators. At the summit, Jake took the stage to share PulseGrid's journey. His words resonated deeply, not just because of the technology but because of the story behind it, the story of a small team fighting for a future where energy belonged to the people. After the talk, Jake found himself surrounded by enthusiastic attendees eager to join the cause, offer support, or share their own experiences. Among them was a representative from a national environmental organization, who proposed a partnership to promote community microgrids nationwide. This was the breakthrough PulseGrid needed. The partnership brought new resources and credibility, expanding their reach beyond the tech sphere into grassroots activism and policy advocacy. With this backing, PulseGrid launched a campaign to educate the public about energy independence and the benefits of decentralized grids. Simultaneously, regulatory bodies began to soften their stance. Evidence mounted that PulseGrid's technology was safe, reliable, and in line with public interest. Legislators influenced by Senator Donovan and other advocates started drafting bills to support microgrid initiatives and incentivize innovation. The Gridway executives, sensing the shift, attempted to renegotiate terms with PulseGrid, this time more cautiously, acknowledging the growing community and political support behind the startup. Jake remained wary but open to dialogue, determined to maintain PulseGrid's core values. Inside the company, the atmosphere lifted. The team, once drained by conflict, found new energy in the progress. Priya spearheaded community outreach with renewed passion. Theo's technical innovations accelerated, fueled by clearer priorities and growing resources. Maya expanded the ambassador program, turning users into advocates. Jake felt a profound sense of pride, not just in the company's achievements but in the collective strength of everyone involved. Yet, the turning point wasn't without challenges. Scaling the platform to meet increasing demand uncovered new technical hurdles. Security concerns persisted in an evolving threat landscape. Balancing rapid growth with quality and trust required constant vigilance. Jake knew the road ahead remained complex. Still, the breakthrough at the Denver summit marked a moment of clarity and hope, a validation that PulseGrid's vision was not only possible but gaining traction. Reflecting on the journey from that fateful first-class flight to this pivotal moment, Jake understood that innovation was as much about perseverance and connection as it was about technology. The weird dude he had once mocked embodied that spirit, a reminder that true vision often comes from unexpected places. As PulseGrid prepared to enter a new phase of growth, Jake and his team embraced the lessons learned, that every challenge carried a seed of opportunity, that community was the foundation of change, and that the future belonged to those brave enough to imagine it. With momentum swinging PulseGrid's way, the company faced a new challenge, staying ahead in an industry racing to catch up. The microgrid market was heating up. Startups popped up overnight, investors scrambled to pour capital into clean energy ventures, and legacy companies hurried to pivot or partner with innovators. For Jake and his team, innovation was no longer just about proving the concept, it was about building a sustainable competitive advantage. Theo, now PulseGrid's lead engineer, pushed the boundaries of what their technology could do. He spearheaded a project integrating AI-driven predictive analytics into their grid management system, aiming to optimize energy flow with unprecedented precision. Maya worked closely with user communities to collect real-time feedback, ensuring the technology met diverse needs and challenges. Priya strengthened PulseGrid's brand by highlighting these advancements through targeted campaigns and thought leadership events. Jake, meanwhile, navigated a complex web of partnerships and funding opportunities. He negotiated deals that brought strategic value without compromising the company's mission. However, the race wasn't without setbacks. One night, Theo discovered a critical flaw in the AI algorithm. Under certain rare conditions, it could cause an energy imbalance, risking outages in connected communities. The discovery sent shockwaves through the team. Fixing the issue required halting updates and dedicating resources to testing and redevelopment. Pressure mounted from stakeholders eager to see continuous progress. Jake gathered the leadership team to address the crisis. "We can't sacrifice safety or reliability," he emphasized. "Our users depend on us. We'll take the time we need." The decision was met with relief internally but confusion from some investors expecting rapid growth. Jake communicated transparently, framing the pause as a commitment to quality and trust. Over the next weeks, the team worked around the clock, refining the algorithm and running exhaustive simulations. The effort paid off. The upgraded AI system not only resolved the flaw but improved efficiency beyond initial projections. The breakthrough was celebrated company-wide, reinforcing a culture of resilience and accountability. Outside the walls of PulseGrid, competitors scrambled to catch up but lacked the deep community ties and adaptive approach that set Jake's team apart. PulseGrid's reputation as a reliable and innovative leader solidified. Yet, the innovation race underscored a larger truth: technology alone wasn't enough. Success depended on relationships, with users, partners, regulators, and each other. The weird dude from that first-class flight had taught Jake that sometimes, the strangest ideas carried the greatest potential when nurtured with patience and trust. As PulseGrid prepared to roll out its next-generation platform, Jake reflected on the journey, how far they'd come and how far they still had to go. The race was far from over, but with a team united by vision and grit, PulseGrid was ready to lead the charge toward a cleaner, more connected energy future. Success often comes with a hidden price, and for Jake, the rapid ascent of PulseGrid began to exact a toll far beyond boardroom battles and technical challenges. As the company's influence expanded, so did the demands on his time and energy. The days blurred into nights, and the boundary between work and life grew increasingly thin. At home, Mark noticed the changes first. Jake's once lively phone calls had grown brief and distracted. Dinner conversations were often interrupted by urgent emails or late-night calls. Weekends, once a sanctuary, became filled with meetings and deadlines. One evening, Mark confronted Jake gently but firmly. "You're burning out. You need to slow down before it's too late." Jake nodded, the weight of exhaustion pressing down. He knew Mark was right, but the fear of letting the team down or losing ground kept him pushing forward. The strain affected other relationships too. Priya, who had become a close confidant, noticed Jake's increasing irritability and tendency to isolate himself. During a rare quiet moment, she urged him to consider counseling and self-care, reminding him that leadership wasn't about sacrificing oneself entirely. Meanwhile, PulseGrid's culture evolved as well. The team admired Jake's dedication but worried about his well-being. They rallied around him with gestures of support, a thoughtful note, a coffee, a quiet word of encouragement, but the intensity of their mission often overshadowed these moments. One particularly taxing incident crystallized the toll. After weeks of non-stop work leading up to a major product launch, Jake collapsed at the office from sheer exhaustion. Priya was the first to find him and insisted he go to the hospital. The diagnosis: severe burnout compounded by stress-induced migraines and insomnia. The doctors urged immediate rest and lifestyle changes. The incident forced Jake to confront an uncomfortable truth: success meant little if he lost himself along the way. Reluctantly, he agreed to step back temporarily. During his recovery, Jake learned to delegate more fully and lean on his team, not as a sign of weakness but as a necessary evolution. He spent time reconnecting with Mark and old friends, rediscovering the simple joys of life beyond the startup grind. The break allowed him to reflect deeply on his values and goals. When he returned to PulseGrid, Jake brought with him a renewed commitment to balance, both for himself and the company culture. Initiatives were introduced to support mental health and work-life integration, making PulseGrid not just a place of innovation but one of care. Jake's journey revealed a vital lesson: true leadership involved nurturing not only vision and technology but also the people who bring those dreams to life, including oneself. The personal cost of the ride was steep, but the recovery illuminated a path forward, one grounded in resilience, empathy, and sustainable success. Jake realized that the legacy he wanted to leave wasn't just about transforming energy but about inspiring others to lead with heart as well as mind. As PulseGrid continued to grow and reshape the energy landscape, Jake found himself reflecting on the strange journey that had brought him here: the moment in first class, the encounter with the weird dude, the battles, the breakthroughs, and the lessons learned. One evening, just as the sun was setting behind the city skyline, Jake received a message that stirred memories he hadn't expected to revisit. It was from Elon Musk himself. The message was brief, almost cryptic: "Meet me. It's time." Curiosity and a flicker of apprehension washed over Jake. He agreed, arranging to meet Elon at a discreet location outside the bustling city. When Jake arrived, Elon was already there, casual and unassuming despite his fame. The two men exchanged a firm handshake, the weight of history between them palpable. Elon began by acknowledging the journey PulseGrid had taken. "I saw potential in you that day on the plane," he said, a rare note of warmth in his voice. "You've done more than prove yourself. You're changing the game." Jake listened, absorbing every word. Elon shared insights from his own experiences, the risks, the failures, and the moments of clarity that shaped his vision. He spoke candidly about the importance of perseverance and the willingness to embrace the unconventional. Then came the revelation. Elon disclosed that his presence in first class that day was no accident. He had been quietly scouting innovators, looking for projects and people that could advance his own goals of sustainable energy and space exploration. PulseGrid's technology aligned perfectly with his vision of a decentralized, resilient future. Elon proposed a partnership. One that could accelerate PulseGrid's development with access to resources, expertise, and a network few could match. The offer was both exciting and daunting. Jake weighed the possibilities against the risks of losing autonomy or becoming just another cog in a giant machine. After thoughtful discussion, they agreed on terms that preserved PulseGrid's mission while leveraging Elon's support. The collaboration opened new horizons: advanced research, joint ventures, and a shared commitment to pushing the boundaries of what energy technology could achieve. Beyond business, the meeting forged a deeper connection. Elon became a mentor figure, challenging Jake to think bigger and bolder. The revelation transformed not just PulseGrid's trajectory but Jake's understanding of what leadership and innovation truly meant. The weird dude from first class was not just a mysterious stranger but a catalyst, an unexpected force that sparked a movement. As Jake returned to the office that night, a sense of closure and new beginnings intertwined. The journey had been unpredictable and at times painful, but it had led to something extraordinary. PulseGrid was no longer just a startup, it was part of a larger vision to change the world. And Jake was ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that sometimes, the most profound revelations come from the most unexpected encounters. The partnership with Elon Musk marked a new era for PulseGrid, but with it came fresh challenges and responsibilities. Jake knew that this was not the end of the story but the beginning of something far greater. As the company integrated Elon's visionary input and resources, PulseGrid accelerated its mission to transform the energy landscape across the nation and beyond. The first visible change was in innovation speed. Projects that had once taken months to develop were now moving in weeks. Advanced battery technologies, AI-powered grid management, and even experimental solar harvesting drones became part of PulseGrid's expanding portfolio. Yet, Jake remained grounded. He held fast to the lessons learned through hardship, the importance of community trust, transparent communication, and balancing ambition with responsibility. PulseGrid's user base swelled as more towns and cities adopted their microgrid solutions. The platform empowered neighborhoods to reduce costs, increase reliability, and lower carbon footprints. Stories poured in from across the country. Single mothers in Ohio gaining stable power during storms, rural schools in Montana finally getting uninterrupted electricity, small businesses in Texas thriving because they controlled their energy. These were the true markers of success. Amid this rapid growth, Jake prioritized building a culture that reflected the company's values. Mental health initiatives, flexible work policies, and ongoing education programs became pillars of PulseGrid's internal life. He personally mentored team members, encouraging them to dream big but stay rooted in empathy and integrity. At home, Jake's relationships flourished. Time with Mark became sacred, a reminder of why all the struggle mattered. They planned trips, explored new hobbies, and built memories outside the shadow of work. Jake even reconnected with old friends he'd neglected, restoring balance and joy. Public recognition followed. PulseGrid and Jake were featured in major media outlets as pioneers in clean energy innovation. Awards and invitations to global forums came, but Jake remained humble, always emphasizing the collective effort behind their achievements. In a particularly memorable keynote speech, Jake shared the story that had sparked it all, the encounter with the weird dude in first class and the journey that followed. He closed with a message for the future: life is full of surprises, but love, courage, and community will always lead the way. When you believe in something bigger than yourself, even the strangest beginnings can become extraordinary. The company's trajectory inspired other entrepreneurs and communities to challenge entrenched systems, fueling a broader movement toward sustainability and empowerment. Reflecting on the years since that flight, Jake realized that his initial mockery had been replaced by profound respect and gratitude. The weird dude, who had seemed out of place, was a visionary who saw potential where others did not. That encounter was the spark for a story of transformation, not just for a company, but for a person, a community, and a future. As PulseGrid prepared to expand internationally, Jake stood on the brink of new horizons, ready to face whatever came next with resilience and hope. The journey taught him that beginnings could be messy and unexpected, but with heart and perseverance, they could lead to the most remarkable endings, and new beginnings. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Jake often thought about that line from the very start and how true it remained. No matter the obstacles, the drive to make a difference was what kept him going, and would keep generations to come inspired to push forward, too. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?